Welcome back into Soul Plus Systems. I'm Jen, and if you're new or you are returning, welcome back in. You know what's funny? I woke up this morning and I had a notification from Facebook this morning about a reel that I had done a year ago today. And I completely forgot that it existed. In the reel, I'm standing in my studio, and all is my hand writing on a piece of paper. And I had wrote one word on that piece of paper, and the word was release. Now, here's the crazy part. The word didn't hit me. The person holding that piece of paper actually did. Because that version of me wouldn't show her face. And that version of me was still making faceless videos. And that version of me was hiding behind graphics, hiding behind quotes, hiding behind messages, and hiding behind stock footage. Sharing ideas without sharing myself. And when I watched that reel, I just sat there for a second because I realized something. That woman had no idea what was absolutely coming. She had no idea that she would build a podcast 5 seasons deep. She had no idea that she'd sit down with strangers and have conversations about trauma, healing, identity, addiction, survival, rebuilding, business, foster care, grief, faith, resilience, and life. And she had no idea that the YouTube channel would cross over 700,000 views. And she had no idea that people would start reaching out, asking to be guests. She had no idea that there would be multiple seasons. And that woman never had the idea that I would be on episode 6 of season 5. And she definitely had no idea that one day that she'd be sitting in front of a microphone talking openly about parts of her own life that she spent years trying not to even think about. And honestly, I really think that's the lesson. Growth doesn't usually announce itself. It happens quietly. It's one uncomfortable step at a time. It's one conversation at a time. It's one upload at a time. And one day at a time. Until eventually you look behind you and you realize that you're just not the same person anymore. And that's what I want to talk about today. It's not the podcast. It's not the business. Not really. I want to talk about armor. Because the more guests that I've interviewed, the more that I've realized something. Almost everybody is carrying it. The details are different, and the stories are different, and the backgrounds are different, but the armor looks surprisingly similar. And over the last year, I've had conversations with people who have survived things that most people will never fully comprehend or even understand. And I've spoken with people who grew up in environments where every part of life was controlled, where questioning wasn't encouraged, and where independence was not celebrated. Where discovering who you actually were required tearing apart everything that you thought that you knew. I've talked with wounded warriors like myself, people who learn survival at a level that most people can't even imagine people who carried responsibilities, pressure, loss, grief, and experiences that don't just disappear because somebody says that they're supposed to. And what's interesting is that no matter how different the stories were, I kept hearing the same things. The battle doesn't always end when the danger ends. And sometimes the battle continues inside of you. And sometimes the armor stays on long after it's needed. And sometimes the walls remain standing. And sometimes the hypervigilance stays active. And sometimes your nervous system doesn't get that memo that you're safe. And if I'm being honest, that hit way closer to home than I expected it to. Because many pieces of my story, you've heard little fragments, references, hints, and small glimpses, but not the whole thing, not even close. Foster care has come up. You know, I've mentioned being removed from my home. You know, there are chapters that I haven't fully discussed. And that's intentional. At least it was. For a long time, I told myself there was no reason to talk about it. I carried my scars in my battles, in my war, for so long. For a long time, I told myself nobody even needs to hear this shit. And for a long time, I convinced myself it didn't matter. But over the last year, something changed. Every time a guest trusted me enough to tell their truth, I started asking myself the questions. How can I even ask anybody to be vulnerable if I am not willing to do the same things? How can I ask someone else to take off their armor if I am still wearing mine? And that's uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. Because here's the truth. When you've spent enough time surviving, survival starts feeling normal. You learn to scan rooms. You learn to read people very quickly. You learn to anticipate problems. You learn to prepare for conflict. And you learn to keep an eye on the exits. In fact, actually, if I'm being completely honest, I count them all. And you learn how to stay ready. Eventually, you become so accustomed to carrying armor that you forget what it feels like without it. And you know what nobody tells you? Nobody tells you that safety still can feel uncomfortable. Think about that. Safety can feel uncomfortable. Nobody tells you that peace can feel suspicious. And nobody tells you that rest can feel foreign. Because when your entire life has been spent preparing for impact, calm, it feels strange. You start waiting for something bad to happen, even when nothing is wrong. And I think there are a lot of people listening right now who understand exactly what I'm talking about. In fact, more than I realized. Maybe your story is different. Maybe it wasn't foster care, the system. Maybe it wasn't trauma. Maybe it wasn't the things that I've experienced. But maybe you've carried armor too. Maybe you've spent years surviving. And maybe you've spent years convincing yourself that being guarded was the same thing as being safe. And it's not. I know I did that for most of my life. And one of the biggest lessons that I've learned, that being guarded was the same thing as being safe. I convinced myself of that for years. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned from this podcast is that strength isn't what I thought it was. When I was younger, I thought strength meant carrying everything, holding everything together, never breaking, never stopping, never resting, and never slowing down. And now, I know strength looks different. I think strength is sexy. I think that strength is honesty. I think strength is vulnerability. And I think that strength is saying, I'm tired. I think strength is saying, I need help. I think strength is saying, I don't have all of the answers. I think strength is being willing to put that armor down. At least for a little while. And that's a lesson that I've been learning, not just through the podcast, but through business too. Let's talk about that. Because social media does a really great job of showing the highlight reel, especially with my adrenaline clips. People see the clips, they see the episodes, they see the views, they see the numbers, but what they don't see is the reality. The editing for hours and hours, the scheduling, the emails, the forms, the websites, the systems, the guest coordination, the content planning, the client work, the constant decisions, the endless list of things that somehow all land on my desk. Being a one-woman show is rewarding, but let's be real, sometimes it's exhausting. There are days I literally don't feel like recording. There are days I don't feel like editing. There are days that I certainly don't feel creative. And there are days that I don't feel motivated. There are days that I want to disappear into my PS5 games and pretend none of this exists. Lately, I've been stuck on the WNBA 2K26, so shout out to the WNBA. Love me some basketball. Go Aces. You know what? That's normal. Because motivation isn't what built this. Consistency built this. Showing up built this. And the reason that the channel crossed 700,000 views isn't because I felt motivated every day. Trust me, I haven't. It's because I kept showing up on the days that I wasn't. And honestly, that's something I'm very proud of. I think I've only missed one day in the last year and a half. So for me, it's not about the numbers. It's not about the views. It's about the consistency. Because nobody sees the uploads that got 50 views. Nobody sees the moments where you question yourself. Nobody sees the mornings where you're wondering if any of it is working. But those moments, they matter. Those moments are where momentum gets built. And as the podcast has grown, something unexpected happened. The guest requests exploded. Mind blown. Literally. People started reaching out, and people, they want to tell their stories. And people, they want to be part of the conversation. And first of all, thank you. Seriously. With much gratitude, thank you. Because every guest who has sat down with me has trusted me with something valuable. Their story, their truth, their experiences. And that's not something that I will ever take lightly. But growth, it creates responsibility. And that's why things have changed. Today, if someone wants to be a guest, they need to complete the application. Not because I'm trying to be difficult. Not because I'm trying to create barriers. Because quality matters. Because protecting the conversations, it matters. And because protecting the audience matters. And because protecting my time, that really matters. And that is literally another thing that I had to learn this year, was boundaries. Boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries are true leadership. The same thing applies to business, and the same thing applies to clients. Being an entrepreneur, getting up day in, day out, making all the choices, building rep after rep. The same thing applies to life. The older I get, the more that I realize that saying no creates room for the right yes. And honestly, that lesson has been freeing. Because for a long time, I said yes to everything. I was a people pleaser. And now I'm becoming much more intentional, and I'm taking up my space. Not smaller, not less ambitious, just more intentional. And that brings me to something else I've learned. Life cannot be all work. It just can't. You cannot build a business and forget to build a life. You cannot chase goals and forget the people around you. You cannot pursue growth and forget to enjoy the journey or stop and smell the roses. And that's one reason community has become so important to me. Rainbow Pride, shot out on Facebook, part of the More Together campaign. And Neon Legacy. My friends, my family, and the people who show up, and the people who support you, the people who remind you that you're more than your productivity, more than your content, more than your business, more than your numbers. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters. Connection. And as we move forward, there's a lot happening. The podcast is growing. The conversations are getting deeper. And the stories, they're getting more real. And you're going to hear more of mine. A lot more. We're going to talk about foster care. We're going to talk about being removed from my home. And we're going to talk about chapters that I've spent years avoiding. Because I think it's time. I think people deserve authenticity. I think people deserve truth. And honestly, I think I'm finally ready. We're also creating more opportunities for this community to connect. Every other Friday, there will be new releases inside of the vault. Journals, prompts, self-reflections, mini system builds. And every Friday at 7 o'clock, I will be going live. Not because I need another project. I really don't. But because I want a place where this community can continue the conversation. A place where we can talk about the things that don't always fit inside the podcast episode. Business, healing, growth, mindset, systems, life, the real stuff. So if you've been listening to this podcast and you've been wondering how to get more involved, start there. Come to the lives, join the conversation, meet the people, and become part of the community. I'll be running those lives on YouTube. I'll think about doing some on TikTok again. Become part of the community, and if you have not subscribed, definitely hit that subscribe button, because the next chapter is going to be the most honest chapter yet. And before I do wrap this up, I want to say something directly to every guest who's ever trusted me. Thank you. I see you. Your story matters. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your honesty. And thank you for your vulnerability. And thank you for sharing pieces of your story with me and with this audience. You changed me more than you'll probably ever really realize. Maybe I'll begin to take the pieces of armor off one level at a time. And finally, to the Strawberry Road Boys and the Wolf Pack, and to the rebuilders, to the entrepreneurs, to the survivors, and to the people still carrying armor, the people trying to figure life out, the people showing up anyway. I see you because I'm one of you. And maybe that's what that piece of paper really was about. Maybe release wasn't about fear. Maybe release wasn't about visibility. Maybe release wasn't about content at all. And maybe release was about finally letting go of the version of myself that only knew how to survive. And maybe that's your challenge too. Not to become perfect, not to become fearless, but to become free. Until next time, we're not here to repeat the past. We're here to rebuild. I'll see you on the next one.